Hello and welcome back to The Marketing Hustle. If it's your first time here, I'm your host, Lottie. If you love hearing unfiltered stories from bold brands on how they do their marketing, then you are very much in the right place. Today, I chatted to Jeremy May, founder of Nice Wines, wine for whenever, that you can see here. They have really made wines in a can a thing. I feel like I don't need to introduce you to this brand or this product, but a few years ago, I would have done. Jeremy and I have actually known each other for over a decade. He introduced me to his co-founder Lucy over a coffee well before they were co-founders, and she's been an inspiration since, and we've had the joy of bumping into each other at parties over and over again since those early Propercorn days. We talked about big budget energy, which is how they get the most out of everything they do. This incredible triangle that Jeremy invented today of what you need to make a good marketing team, and I'm not going to give you any plot spoilers, you'll have to listen to him more about that, and the distribution and pricing thinking that's gone into making Nice Wine what it is. I really hope you enjoy this as much as I did. This episode is brought to you by Be a Bear. Be a Bear specialise in growing audiences. They believe that the best way to build any business is with an engaged and excited audience. And over the past 6 years, they've worked on strategies to support local startups through to global super brands. This year, they've delivered projects for Molton Brown, Red Bull, MTV and Channel 5, to name a few, and they're currently working with a couple of brands from the Upworld community to help build their market awareness. Go and check them out. For now, back to the show.
Awesome.
This is quite fun because we've obviously known each other for a very long time.
Yeah, 10 years, I reckon. No, yeah, I joined Propercorn in 2014. I think you were just after 2015. Yeah, exactly.
Really not far after you at all.
I know, it's wild, isn't it?
And so the context was you were head of international.
Yeah.
I was head of marketing. Although it was pretty dubious. I feel like I grew into that role.
Yeah, well, you have to, don't you?
first few months, really, really dubious. But then...
Yeah, because Alex was still there at that time, wasn't he? He had been head of marketing.
Yes, yeah. So I was recruited by Alex Petridis, who was brand director.
That's right, yeah.
Then went on to be co-founder of All Plants. And then basically Alex is like such a thread in my whole career.
Yeah.
Like Alex has just so many times pulled me into situations with wonderful effects. And then in the case of Propercorn was like, great, have this job. Bye. It was like, no, I've joined you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
this was the point. What is this? So you were running international. I was running marketing. And we had quite fun.
It was a great time, wasn't it?
It was great.
Yeah, I always reflect on that time at Propercorn. I really have a tough time remembering to call it proper because obviously the whole time
I know, and I did the rebrand.
Yeah, really, exactly. Yeah.
So, I remember writing those slides.
To me, the nostalgia of it will always be Propercorn.
Absolutely.
But rightly so, the new name Proper. Yeah, that was such a great time. You know, everything we all collectively touched turned to gold. Great.
It was amazing.
Met lots of like lifelong friends there.
Yeah.
You know, great founders, just a really exciting place to be. And like, I think a lot of people who cut their teeth in that business went on to be entrepreneurs elsewhere, which I remember from my first ever interview with Cassandra. She said, we're looking to hire entrepreneurs, whether they achieve their entrepreneurial goals in our business or eventually outside our business. That's what we want. And I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. That's what I want to do. That's how she said it to me. Yeah. And it's funny because I was, I don't think I've ever told them this, but at the time, the only reason I went to the interview for it, because actually at the time I'd never heard of Propercorn. I had been headhunted, or a recruiter got in touch with me to try to get me to go for the job at Fever Tree. They needed maternity cover for their export manager, and so I went to that, and they said, look, at the same time, why don't you go to see these guys? Yeah. And so I did, just as much as anything, to explore what it's all about. And I was like, this is epic. I want to come and work here.
Yeah,
even though Fever Tree was enormous at that time already. But they had actually gone through a lot of that growth and they were already private equity owned.
Side, yeah.
Exactly. And so it would have been no doubt an interesting time to work there, probably for different reasons. But yeah, coming into Propercorn, it was still a fairly embryonic business. And it was a great time to be there. Yeah, I loved it.
I had no idea that. Yeah. I think because I had a very different route in.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I was like, there wasn't a role that I was applying for. I was like Alex's wild card idea.
Yeah.
And I think, so I didn't know that like that was their ethos.
Yeah.
And like, don't think I would have shown evidence at that point of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not sure I was in a place where I'd really worked out what I was going to be.
But in a way, I think that's what Cassandra was saying is I don't need to see that. I don't need to see that you had a lemonade stand when you were 14 at school. Yeah. I just need you to understand that we're like all going to be on this entrepreneurial journey together in one way or another. I need you to think like a startup, rather than think like a big corporate. And I was coming in from a 200 million turnover business. So probably something that they wanted to focus on even more with me. Yeah. So
that's so interesting.
I know.
And also really prophetic, because this is
exactly.
what we always like. I feel like when we ever cross paths, the alumni from that like incredibly specific moment in time is really cool.
Yeah.
There's like a handful of us doing really interesting, quite different things. Yeah. So like Thea from Young Foodies, who like some of the listeners might also know was like absolutely part of that time, who I caught up with so recently. And it's just like
Alex Petridis. I'm trying to think. There are certainly lots of others. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Natalie went on to found a business. Yeah, there's a number. It's really cool.
Really, really amazing breeding ground.
Yeah.
And I think I learned, like, I think I thought I knew some stuff in big business, but I think that's where I learned my trade.
Yeah. Me too. I mean, you have to act as if a little bit, don't you? I mean, I'm probably going to talk about that a lot in this podcast. But even in that role, you know, again, I don't mind admitting now that I didn't have all of the experience that Propagon was going to need for me to be head of international. No. But I knew I could learn it on the way. Yeah. So I'd been running the international part of a much bigger business, but their export division was tiny. I literally started it, you know, of a 200 million turnover business, we were doing about 5, but it was tiny because they had, you know, and but we had always worked directly with retailers in each market. So, you know, when they asked me the question, so do you know loads of distributors in the Netherlands? I was like, yeah, loads. Yeah, I'll get my black book out. Anyone got a black book? You know what I mean? So, but it worked. It worked because I understood, the what it was going to take to build the brand there. And also what I loved, I think it exists anyway in food and drink, but especially in the world of exporters, there's this like fraternity of people that are basically all trying to help each other out because rather than go to a new country and try and work out who the best distributors are, we would basically follow around. I'd go to a market, see what was on all the shelves, brands from Britain, and I'd contact their export manager and just say, who are you working with? And they say, well, we're working with these guys. We did meet them who are better in snacks. But, you know, we went with this. And oh, by the way, we're looking for someone in Sweden. Do you know anyone? And we're like, yeah, we're working with these guys. And it was just like, this is the dream. We're all working all together. Yeah, exactly. And so you did have to learn on the job big time. But it was a great breeding ground for that. I loved it.
And you learned strategy.
Yeah. 100%.
I think we actually learned that we had to focus. Like the only way we delivered that growth. And that was I mean, I guess that was so much of the moments we interacted was like how you build a really healthy relationship between sales and marketing.
Yeah, 100%.
That was actually way more constructive than I've seen elsewhere in my career.
Yeah.
But was really about trade-offs.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we can't do everything. So how are we going to make those prioritization decisions?
Yeah, exactly. I think, I mean, I was less involved in that as time went on because we eventually in the international team had international brand manager. Yeah. And so it was sort of her job to be the conduit between our distributors in different markets and our marketing team. But I imagine it was something that became harder and harder as the departments got bigger and bigger because like when you're a group of 10 and the marketing team are 3 people sitting over there and the sales team are 3 people sitting this side of the desk, it's quite a lot easier to have unification of those strategies. Whereas I think as the business got bigger, it was probably just harder to have like the holistic sales strategy totally married up to the holistic brand and marketing strategy. Yeah.
I've got no idea. I think we just did a good job that I've tried to always do since then of having the conversations.
Yeah, exactly.
And like just getting out of that cycle of trying to overcommit to everyone internally. Like we made some decisions where there were markets we were like, we're going to do absolutely nothing. They're going to get they're going to get really kind of just, when we had the trade marketing manager who were kind of like joint line managing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like how do we make sure that they actually know really where they're focusing, that they're really comfortable doing a 1 out of 10 job in other places. Yeah. Has that been like, I've definitely taken that through every moment in my career since. Yeah. Have you had a similar path?
I think so, yeah. I mean, in our business, well, actually, one thing I was going to say before we go into that, one thing I was going to say about Propercorn is it was an amazing way to learn loads of things. Partly things that we do in our business that we did at Propercorn because I thought this is amazing. Yeah. And partly things where we do almost the opposite because as an employee there, there were things where I thought, oh, okay, yeah, I understand why they've done that, but I think I'd do it this way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's life experience.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just a collage of things you're borrowing or rebelling against.
Exactly, yeah. So, but yeah, that point about sort of trying to marry up, marketing objectives with sales objectives. Actually, one of the biggest things I often find myself having to try and remind our business of, and anyone else I'll speak to really to some extent, is I think there is a little bit of sort of a misunderstanding about what literally the term marketing means, and it getting interpreted often as like brand activity or brand activation, let's say, rather than the holistic view of what marketing is, which is, I mean, literally to take it all the way back to the 4 Ps that I learned at, A-level business studies. The promotion part of the 4 Ps or the campaigns and those things are just one part of it. So like I think people lose sight of that sometimes, and it all becomes about
the whole industry's
this shiny new thing that is either an above the line campaign or a influencer marketing campaign or something, but actually really forgetting that. I mean, so the reason I talk about that, or going to talk about that, is for us, our distribution is by far and away our number one marketing resource. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. I can't even hasten a guess at what the percentage of interactions that all human beings have with our brand. Yeah. It has to be above 99%, I would say, because we're in maybe 7,000 distribution points now, and whether someone sees us on the Virgin, airline, 5 million passengers fly Virgin every single year. 2 million of them drink our cans. Yeah. If I think I can try and reach, in a meaningful way, reach material, that's just one of our customers. Yeah. Imagine how many interactions people are having with our brand. Yeah. In literally its distribution in retailers and stadiums and music venues,
and how much of their perception of your brand is being formed by the environment in which they experience that.
Exactly.
So, a delicious wine on a flight when they wouldn't expect it to be is a hugely powerful piece of brand building.
Exactly. Lots of dwell time. Make sure the packaging's looking good. Make sure that on first inspection the packaging makes someone want to pick it up. Yeah. And on second inspection, with a bit of dwell time, they realise, oh, wow, that's a clever copy, or that's an interesting story in the back.
Feel there's a little emotional connection.
Whatever it is, exactly. So for me, that it starts there, and then it's a case of how can we bolster those interactions, and how can we tell more people that they exist. Yeah. Does that make sense? So yeah, for us, I think that balance between, or that relationship between marketing team and sales team is even more inherent, because also a lot of what we do is at the point of purchase or at the point of decision making. So I think we get a lot of plaudits for how we show up on social media, or how we run some sort of stunt and amplify it, but where we really want to be showing up is at the in that distribution. Do you know what I mean? So it's a nice thing to be able to get plaudits for all those things and be seen by a lot of people. And when you have social media that goes viral, like, that feels awesome. Seeing it tick up over the millions, that's epic. I love it. But it's sort of, it's quite intangible, and
well, it's very much like the cream on top of a very big cake.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like, it's nice, and it makes it all feel sparkly, but that business and the fact that you are succeeding in market is built on all of that other stuff. You're completely right, and I go on about this in every course I teach, so it's really nice to hear it validated. I haven't had to prompt you, but what about the other stuff, Jeremy?
Exactly. I know.
So distribution for sure, like place, if you go back to the 4 Ps, but product and price that are way before you've got into distribution,
100%,
are key marketing
definitely
requirements.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about within our business, so Lucy and I started the business to address or improve a very specific moment in wine that we didn't think was being well catered for. So
what was that?
So our business launched as only canned wine, and now
Yeah.
we have a number of different formats, which I'll speak about in a second. But so to really simplify it, Lucy and I had decided that we would be a good partnership for starting a business. We were both freelancing. On the third time of meeting, we both said, this is great, we're getting to learn a lot, but I feel like it's time to do it for ourselves. At the moment, we're helping other entrepreneurs build their, dream business, and we want to do it for ourselves. I don't know what it is yet, but let's do it together. And she discovered a brand of canned wine on Instagram, the most millennial way to start a business ever, and just became obsessed with it. She said, I'd never thought about this before. And it was an American brand in New York. And suddenly thought, oh my God, yeah, the on-the-go occasion for wine is dreadfully catered for.
Yeah.
If you go to a train station and you want to buy a wine for on the go, it's a little plastic bottle that looks like wine, but no one drinks out of it.
Yeah.
So then some of them have literally plastic cups strapped to the top. The biggest innovation we saw at the time was a little plastic glass with foil tear-off lids, which solved the functional issue of not being able to drink from it, but for some reason no one bought it. It was a bit tragic, badly branded, whatever. So it just felt obvious. Canned wine is the solution to this, and it's already happening in America, and it's already gone from $5 million to 14 to 40 million in its first 3 years, and it was like, this is a thing, we're going to do it. So come back to the point, which is product in that instance was we looked at the category. So we looked at the miniature wine category, which was worth around 100 million at the time, growing at 5% against the backdrop of a wine category that wasn't growing. And RTDs, so canned cocktails and pre-mixed drinks, that was worth about 150 million and growing at 25%. So we looked at this addressable market and said, there is an opportunity to launch canned wine in Britain. Craft beer brands have made canned alcohol good, because until then every single alcoholic drink in a can was considered to be low quality. So craft beer had done that job. Gin and tonics were doing it as well. It was wine's time to shine. So from a literally product format perspective, we felt like we were onto something. It was then a case of building a brand that didn't feel like it was just another wine brand, that was going to get people's attention, make people pick it up for the first time, speak to a very specific type of consumer, because we are a female-founded company, a proudly female tone of voice business. We don't seek to exclude men in any way, but the bullseye target of our packaging, comms, everything is broadly female. And that just felt like something that was going to really make sense. We then wanted to launch grape varietals that were very easy to understand, very on trend, not polarizing. So all of these things were going on at the same time. And then we had to reach a price point that was not asking people to change their behavior for something that's going to cost them more. Does that make sense? So we had to...
You're already fighting one battle.
This wasn't about launching a, premium canned wine brand, because the concept is almost an oxymoron. We had to make sure that the packaging looked great, it was very clearly identifiable as wine, and grape varietals that people like and understand easily, and then it had to be at a price point that wasn't prohibitive to someone picking it up. So literally for us, the marketing of this brand started way before we were thinking about what our social media would look like, or what campaigns we would do, or what above the line would look like for us. It started with the product. So that was really important.
The mistake I see get made so often is trying to change consumer behavior on too many different fronts, or to be clear, more than one front. Changing someone's behavior is so hard. We are such deep-rooted creatures of habit.
100%.
And our neural pathways are dug so deep, and we're so time poor. That and that's just we just don't want to do it. Exactly. So you worked that out, and honestly, I'm sure founders listening to this have worked with me, and this is really good validation for what I always go on about, which is you have one lever of change. And for you, format is significant.
Exactly. And actually, if you think about it, we weren't even launching anything strange or new. We were just combining two things that are very well known. A can and wine are both things that, like,
yes, but
in isolation aren't strange at all.
But in the minds of...
Exactly, but once they were blended
Exactly.
together, it was the only thing that could be different. The price couldn't then be different. You couldn't have random grape varietals. So that was
until...
exactly it.
Does that change? Like, is there a moment
Will
where
we change that, do you mean?
Yeah,
or
like
will that change
as
eventually?
familiarity in canned wine
Yeah.
is growing, and I assume we're not like there yet, but it feels like there's been a real tidal
Definitely,
shift.
yeah.
Does that mean that you're then allowed other levers?
I think so, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, so if you look at the category at large, there is now definitely space for more premiumization,
Yes.
or like pricing hierarchy at least, because as a market or as a category evolves and matures, like that's one of the things that's needed. So pricing hierarchy can change. Then I think choice is really important. So from a grape varietal perspective, like there does need to be more choice on the whole. One of the things that is actually quite difficult in our category is that buyers are often changing regularly, because it's sort of quite an easy category to get juniors to come in and cut their teeth on, because the BWS or beers, wines and spirits world in general is you get quite a lot of continuity there, but new buyers will want to come in and taking the little formats category, which is normally cans, bag-in-box, things other than 75cl bottles, is an easy one to be like, come and manage this for a bit and see if you can cut your teeth on it.
Is that because it's seen as smaller and...
Yeah, it's smaller
less of a mainstay
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's
revenue?
a £7 billion category, just still wine in the UK grocery channel. And, miniatures right now is probably worth just over 200, and cans is about 35 of that.
Wow.
From a standing start 5 years ago. So it's small in the scheme of things, for sure. And the reason I brought that up is because what can end up happening is, one person's decisions will then be inherited by another. And so, like, we've been in retailers where they've ended up having like 3 different Sauvignon Blanc cans on the shelf in a range of 6, and you're just like, like anyone who understands how category works can see that, and that always gets addressed eventually.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that's difficult. So, like, what does the perfect range look like in this space? There's some like differentiation of brand for sure. Like, we're not suggesting that we should be the only brand on the shelf. Like, that's not what a category is in my mind. And so you're having hierarchy of price and grape varietal choices, even at some point ABV choices as well, about strength of alcohol. So yeah, I think there is definitely space for that. But it has to, for our brand especially, it had to start with how can we be the mainstay of it? How can we be the automatic choice, and that those other things be slightly more proliferated? And I wouldn't be in a hurry at the moment to launch like 3 different white wines to offer that choice. I would rather offer variations of other kinds, whether it be packaging, whether it be, because at the moment a single can is a very impulse led product, especially in wine. So, in our convenience listings, when we're in a chiller, the rate of sale is absolutely insane. But in the back of store, when people are buying wine to chuck in their weekly shop to go in the fridge at home, is there a role for a multi-pack there, for example? So that's the kind of thing we would be looking to do. And the marketing mix starts with products that start with that. Yeah, products and price.
But today, your cans front of store.
Yep.
Some bottle formats?
Yep. So we where we started the business very overtly to try and give a better solution for that on-the-go wine occasion. Once we got into the category, we realised or felt like there was lots of other parts of the category that there was space for differentiation or disruption in, essentially. So the first thing we launched the first product we launched after cans was actually bag-in-box. So we were in this was a really interesting one for us, because we were in the midst of the first lockdown in COVID, and we had very purposefully, in the first year, so we launched in March 2019, so we were almost exactly 1 year until they shut half of our customers down in the on-trade. And so we hadn't been trying to build an e-commerce business at all at that time. We had a very impulse-led product. We, I think, put our products onto Amazon, but had never run an ad. Like, they were just sitting there doing absolutely no revenue whatsoever. Then suddenly overnight, we sold 40 grand's worth of wine in April just on Amazon. And it was like, whoa. So we reached out to consumers to try and understand what was driving that. And it was started by the fact that availability of anything was low. So like if you could get your hands on anything, anywhere,
whatever format
let's do
it was
exactly.
in, yeah.
But then we were seeing that continue and continue. So when we asked the question, what's making you buy our products online? People loved that it was portion control. So just having one can every evening. Well, every evening during COVID, but
but portion, exactly.
And also,
exactly.
Basically, not opening a bottle and either feeling like you have to finish it or throw some of it away because wine does spoil once it's been opened.
Yeah, and there's something about opening a bottle on a Monday that gets you, and it's different.
Yeah. Also, people in households wanting to drink different things, but feeling obliged to compromise because it's like, well, you want white, I want red. We're opening the white. So we were seeing that, and we felt like bag in box was a much better solution for those people. So we could provide to them the same quality of wine, but at better value, essentially, and it stays fresh in their fridge for 6 weeks. The category was growing like 40% at that time, so it was just a total no-brainer. And in the UK, bag in box wine has always been this like cheap plonk entry-level private label world. So again, changing human beings' behavior is difficult, but there is no reason, like there is nothing to say that you can't have a very, very high quality wine from a bag in box.
Well, no, and if you asked a French man, they'd say, of course it's no different.
Yeah, in French grocery, 40% of sales are bag in box. 40%. They're just so happy to have it as their wine, their table wine at home. It literally lives in the fridge.
Because table wine is its own category.
Exactly, yeah. So we knew that there was a space for that, and it was just an obvious thing for us to do. So yeah, we have bag in box. 2 years ago, we looked at what we refer to as like the traditional on-trade. So that's pubs, bars, restaurants. And again, we were just so surprised when you walk into, and you might feel the same, but when you walk into a pub or bar, the beer category, like the beer brands, are front and center on the bar. They have earned your loyalty over years. Everyone has their favorite brand, and if yours isn't there, you'll go to your second. And I mean, I don't know to what extent. My favorite is Camden Hells. Could I pick Camden Hells out of a blind tasting of 3 other lagers? Almost certainly not, but I don't care.
You'll just go to it.
I've seen it. I want the glass. I'm buying Camden Hells. It's front and centre. It's made my choice for me. The spirits are doing the same thing. You ask for a gin and tonic, they say, which would you like? And you can look up and see all these great brands that are at your loyalty. You ask what wines they have, and they look at you blankly, and they're like, "Are you really going to make me read out?" Because they don't have a menu. So you either order the house, or you might say, "Do you have any pale rosés? Can I see your rosé? I want to see how pale it is." But like, you can't stand there and go like, "What's the wines of the day, sir?" And they'll go, "I have no idea, to be honest with you. Can you just order something that's not annoying for me?" So we launched Wine on Tap for that exact reason. It has multiple benefits. You don't get wastage of bottles being opened and not used. Speed of service is quicker. It's much more sustainable for the environment, not having to get rid of loads of glass. So there's loads of benefits to it. And now we're in over 100 venues with Wine on Tap. And then more recently, we launched Session Wine. So so if you think about all of the products I've talked to you about so far are basically taking our great tasting, nice wines and putting them in packaging formats that best suit moments and occasions and the way people's lives are, going. So Session Wine was the first time that we did what I would describe as liquid innovation versus format innovation. So similarly, and this is something we've been working on since 2021 actually, wine is incredibly strong. Like people get caught out by wine, I would say, more often than any other category because it's a drink that you can absolutely, knock back, but the average wine is 12.5%. Like your average beer is 4%, 4.5% maybe. So and for anyone who is even slightly on the scale of lightweight or whatever you want to call it, lots of my friends, wine is their favorite drink. But if you go to a barbecue, they are literally moderating by like, oh no, I can't have another one of those. Like that's going to catch me out so much.
Oh yeah.
And in the beer category, there's loads of choice of ABV. In wine, weirdly, there is a lot of choice of ABV, but it's all between 10 and 14.5%. So
it's in the strong.
That the world of wine literally lives somewhere between about 10 and 14.5, maybe 15, and probably 90% is between, until the duty changes came in last year, but probably 90% of it, maybe even 95% of it, is between 11.5 and 13.5. There's already a variation at that end.
And that's kind of accidental as opposed to designed by consumer need, because I don't think anyone's shopping for 11% versus 13%.
Well, this is the point.
Yeah.
Right? So, very few people are looking at the wine and thinking, oh yeah, I was looking for something a little bit lower, a little bit higher, whatever, because it's not on lots of packaging. It's not even on the front of pack. It's a forgotten thing at the back, but it's strong. A large glass of wine is you can't drive after one large glass of wine in most cases. So we wanted to launch something that was offering choice on ABV, offering people the ability to moderate more easily. The other thing that's really challenging within wine is, so in other categories, that's been done by, in the beer category especially, non-alcoholic beers are very, very close in quality and style to the real thing, to full strength beers. So there'll be times where I might go out on a Wednesday night and have a couple of full strength beers and then a couple of Lucky Saints,
exactly the same,
right? And that's the dream. That's an easy way to moderate without feeling like you're missing out in any way. Wine is a very complex liquid. It's very, very difficult to get totally non-alcoholic wine to really taste anything like wine. So, and to be honest with you, I've always, I'll probably get in trouble for saying this because you never know what comes down the line, but I find it a little bit difficult to imagine being a wine brand that would also be advocating for totally zero. Does that make sense? So, and I think there are some brands who are big enough to do it, but I think as a sort of disruptive, fast-growing business that's trying to make a name for itself, I think there is risk of confusion about being as much for an abstainer as there is for a great time at a festival. Does that make sense? We didn't really want to launch zero for more than one reason. We didn't feel like you could get to the quality that we would want. And we also feel like there is at least some level of conflict of having a brand that on the one hand is advocating for alcohol's all good and great. It's a bit like, if you had a meat brand also launching vegan products, it wouldn't work because vegans are so strong-minded and so strong-willed about it. Yeah. It would be incredibly strange to be on the other side being marketed to by the same company about how great their pork sausages are.
Well, it's also about what your brand platform stands for. So it comes back to the you have your one lever. If your lever is around format innovation and occasion, then that's different to a brand that could have been built on variety, perhaps. And if it was all about variety of products, then that would make more sense under one roof. So I think in the context of your brand, I fully understand that logic.
Yeah, and to be honest, as much as anything, it came down to the fact that making wine totally zero alcohol, extracting all of the alcohol from wine, really is really hard to do. Yes. And the outcome is so vastly different from what you're expecting from wine that whilst it might taste good, just objectively as a drink, if it's trying to be wine, it's quite a long way from it.
It's challenging.
Exactly. So we landed on something that was more like a third of the strength of full strength wine. So the point being that you and I could sit here right now and enjoy the conviviality of sharing a bottle together.
Which
over an hour, which maybe we should have done.
We should have done on a Friday afternoon.
Which we could have done over an hour and still driven home if we wanted to, or known that tomorrow get up early to go to the gym and you're not even going to have the slightest little bit of dusty head. So that's why we launched Session Wine, and I don't know when this is going to come out, so I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about this yet, but we've just won a big award for that launch this year.
Amazing.
Which is going to be in a well-known FMCG magazine soon.
Coming to a shelf near you.
Exactly, yeah.
Amazing. I wonder what that might be. That is a fascinating story.
Yeah.
So there's been all of that change, and then you do have this other, there's like the marketing that starts before you launch the products and the marketing that's in the innovation pipeline, which is really significant. There's also lots of marketing people in your business doing some of the other stuff and presumably doing lots of contributing to this. Like,
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
How does your marketing team work in this view that they're responsible for all of this stuff?
Well, yeah, I guess to clarify, all of the stuff I talked about in the sort of planning of the marketing mix is something that, Lucy and I had to do in the very early stages.
That's kind of my question.
Exactly.
Like a lot of that's foundational and is in the brand proposition.
Yeah.
And yet you have a team.
Yeah, exactly. So we're a long way evolved from those early fledgling days. And our marketing team, their big objective is aligned with something I said earlier, which is to amplify distribution, to have fun doing it, get noticed, be exciting, behave differently to wine brands the way you might expect wine brands to show up. And I think over the years we've done some really cool stuff, but there have probably been times where we're trying to do too many things and only pull off half of them, whereas we're starting to try and focus on doing fewer things better. It's very easy in the early days, especially when you get approached by this agency or this influencer or this PR, and you just think, God, yeah, we should be doing that. You know what? We should be sending wine to that event. You never know who might be there. But what we've got really good at, I think, is being very deliberate about what we do. So there is obviously and has to be space for being nimble and being reactive to things that are going on. But I think we've got to a really good point, and we are actually a fairly small marketing. I mean, in total, we're only a team of 12 as a business, and we have a team of 3 in marketing. We work with a lot of great freelancers, and you might have heard this phrase before because Lucy and I talk about it on podcasts a lot, but we have this theory of or this principle of big budget energy. Yes. So BBE is all about trying to have it look like we had a hell of a lot of money to spend. And I think we are continuing to do that well, but it relies on doing fewer things better.
What does
that makes sense.
Mean? I've heard your team talk about this. I love this phrase.
Yeah.
I love that it's like genuinely becoming quite iconic.
Yeah. It's rooted in, do you know where it all started from, to be honest with you? And like, we didn't use it back then, but this is like a manifestation of it. So one of the first pieces of marketing activity of any kind that we did in 2019 was a partnership with Nasty Gal, which used to be okay before fast fashion got cancelled. And this is a great example so I'll tell you the whole story, but we got approached by Nasty Gal because they had just got this bus and they were planning to wrap it and take it around Manchester with a load of influencers, and they just wanted some wine. And we looked at it and thought, yeah, we could just supply them wine, or why don't we see if they're up for like doing a bit more of a partnership? I mean, how perfect is the nice and nasty? Like, there's got to be something we could do.
And your colours are the same.
Exactly. So went up to meet them in Manchester, and it turned out they were also doing a trip to Ibiza that year with a whole load of influencers, and they wanted to turn it into the nice and nasty. They had videographers, photographers, a house in Ibiza, these 10 influencers going out, and they created all these pink jumpsuits for us because we already had the jumpsuit, our own, but they did nice and nasty. And so it's a long story, but the reason behind it is like what started as could have been a tiny little thing, give us some free wine, turned into our head of brand at the time went out to Ibiza. They created all of the content and they shared it for like 2 weeks as a huge campaign to all of their social media followers. I think at the time they had 5 million followers. And it was insane. It was like a total partnership. And we got a message from someone saying, oh my God, that's insane. What did that cost you? 50 grand? And they're probably right. It probably should have cost that. Yeah. But it cost us the cost of a flight to Ibiza and some samples. Like that's literally what it cost us. Yeah. And so that is big budget energy. Like that is beg, stealing and borrowing to do something that felt like it had a value of X, but really had a cost of Y. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And that principle may not work forever. It may not work forever to turn up to every single marketing endeavor and say, we've got no money to do it. But the theory and the like value behind it is right. It's like, how can we get loads more value from this than is literally the cost of it? Does that make sense?
You just invest more and raise the bar higher.
Yeah, exactly.
So I definitely think there's a tipping point where you can stop saying like, we're just a tiny little brand.
Yeah, of course. That
exactly. Like sub story like does get tired, and I've like seen people's eyes.
Yeah, I mean, we get it all the time. Yeah, we're looking for a drink sponsor. Yeah,
and you're like, okay. Yeah. So that definitely shifts, but there's then. It's then just enter a new league, and the rules of the game are the same. It's just a bigger game.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
every
good budget you do have,
exactly,
you just sweat so much harder.
A good example of that, I would say, is in 2021. We had we were in Sainsbury's. We were exclusive to Sainsbury's in the grocery channel, and we were still in and out of lockdowns. It was a pretty bad time. And we had promised Sainsbury's that we would do this big activation, and they'd put us in some new distribution as a result of it. And we planned this whole thing during summer. It was going to be this one big activation. We were going to press it to high heaven, and we worked with an agency to do it. And at the 11th hour, we were just like, this is going to be rubbish. We can't do it. We cannot go ahead with this activation. It's going to be rubbish. It's going to cost us a whole ton of money, and it's not going to get any impact. It's not going to get picked up by press. And although we might be able to show it to the Sainsbury's buyer to say, look, we did what we said we'd do, it's the opposite of big budget energy. It's going to be rubbish. Let's back out of it. We had to spend half the money to just back out of it, but it wasn't right for us. And so at the 11th hour, we said, what can we do quickly that's going to have impact? And so we decided to do a very small tactical above the line campaign. And we worked with an amazing media planning guy, media buyer who, has made a name for himself in the industry. His name is Mark O'Rourke.
I was going to say.
Everyone knows who he is because he's an absolute legend.
We all know who he is, and he's such a good guy.
We'd been talking to him for a long time before that, actually, because we got introduced. He was doing some work for Tenzing and had got some great results. And he is. I describe him as like the Robin Hood. This is actually good. I describe him as the Robin Hood of media buying. He takes from the rich and gives to the poor. He describes himself as the TK Maxx of media buying. So I love both, but I prefer mine.
I think he's doing himself such a disservice because he's so creative.
Yeah, he's great. Exactly. But what I loved about it is we just went to him and said, look, I know we've been talking about doing something like this for a while, and we've had a campaign up our sleeve ready to go if we need to, because we trialed it on digital, all at his recommendation. And we just said, what can we switch on really quickly? We don't have the budgets to like measure it before, measure it after. This isn't actually as much about, reaching X amount of eyeballs, Y amount of times. It's about being a bit down the dirty and getting something out the door. And we put something together really, really quickly. We got loads of overshow for it. It was just at a time when all of the, it was just after all of the Get-Ears and Wheezies and all those of the world were just like on every single billboard on the underground, and they'd all just had their budgets cut, and there was a load of basically distressed space on the underground, and it was like, let's go for all of it. And it was epic. I mean, you can never truly like value that stuff because someone's always going to come up with a number, but at the best guess we must have got like 10 times the value of what we spent on that. It was awesome. So,
was the creative just like brand led, or was the creative cut? Was there cut through in the creative?
It was, the creative was simple but effective.
Okay.
It wasn't trying to do too much. It was can imagery with very short, punchy copy.
Nice.
At the time, I can't remember. We tried a few different things. But all around the same sentiment. So at the time we had this sort of campaign, which was called, it just said, wine in a can, it's a thing. And it was sort of perfect at the time because it wasn't telling anyone what to do. It was quite clever because it was saying, we know that you think canned wine is weird, but it's a thing now. Like
it was solving a very specific single challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was the challenge of that moment in time.
Yeah. So I've seen something recently that is obviously a lot better but a fantastic example of something quite similar, which is Oatly has a campaign at the moment where it just says it works in tea, and I think that is so clever. and they've tried so many different things over the years, but that's 4 words that just really cuts to the point of like, oat milk, can I do that? Can I use that for this? It's like, it works in tea.
Yeah.
Just, I don't care if you think it does or it doesn't, it works in tea. It's so clever.
Just solves a very specific problem.
So yeah, it was simple. It was a simple campaign. You know, I don't think it would have gone on winning any awards, but it had a very specific objective for us, and it delivered it on an absolute shoestring budget. So yeah, it was good. I'd shout out Maddie Tomlin Reeves for that, because you know, she was a former marketing intern of ours who went to spend a couple of years at Cheesy's and then came back to be brand manager, and she pulled that all together. I mean, that was her. She was 4 months into the role.
It's amazing.
So yeah, I mean, talk about baptism of fire. It's great. Yeah.
Nice.
It's good.
How has I keep saying nice, and every time I do it makes me smile. How has your view of marketing, like, what have you learned? How's it evolved?
It's a good question. I think it's very easy for marketing for marketing budgets to be the first thing that are cut when you might be teetering on the edge of not hitting your revenue targets. And I think I've worked in lots of businesses where that happens, because it's the most simple discretionary spend to back out of. And like, sometimes that is just necessary, but we would try to ring fence, you know, marketing strategic activity as much as possible to avoid getting in a doom cycle of not hitting the revenue you might be intending to, chipping back on marketing expense, continuing not to hit the revenue, chipping back even further. So from that perspective, it's something that we want to, we don't want to be seeing marketing spend as actually totally discretionary, even though it is the most discretionary of those things.
How do you do that practically, though? Because I obviously fully believe in sentiment, and yet have sat in enough rooms where I've gone, look, okay, take it out of the marketing budget because I see that there's nowhere else to go. Yeah. Are there other pots?
There is. There's making a decision about pushing that hire back that you might have been intending to make by 2 to 3 months. There's other things you can do. There's changing your funding cycle. There's saying no to other things. You know, sometimes what it might be about is prioritizing the type of marketing activity you're doing. As an example, I would say, if you've just been asked to cut 20% of your marketing budget because you're not hitting revenue, it might be that instead of supporting that, music festival that you were going to pay a big listing fee to be at, which would come out of the marketing cost, or sponsor essentially, that perhaps you re-funnel that into digital ads, because those are going to deliver revenue and they're going to have the halo effect of brand awareness. So it might just be that, like, look, the thing we were planning to do over here, which has a much less tangible link to revenue,
or maybe a more long-term outcome.
Exactly. Maybe we shift it to over here, which means, yes, it's a change of plan, but it's not that we're just walking out on the marketing team, so to speak.
Not quite, what have you learned about what makes great marketeers? You've had some really talented people come through the nice marketing team.
I think the best marketeers, and there are quite few and far between, but that's okay, because you can build teams with knowing that. The absolute best marketeers are great for ideas, very creative, and can come up with a whole conveyor belt of ideas, be discerning enough to know which ones are good and bad, as part of a sort of collective decision-making group, and then strong at executing.
Because get shit done.
Exactly. Because one without the other is a complete waste of time on both fronts. You can be great at executing and really bad at coming up with ideas, and a really good ideas person that never gets anything done, and ultimately the outcome will be terrible. So the best marketeers have the predisposition to be good at the ability to be ideas centric and can get them done. Now, the reason I said that, like that, they are few and far between. So as long as you're aware of that, but that's probably one of the biggest challenges is like having the self-awareness to know where your area starts and stops. So everyone would like to think maybe that they're good ideas people or discerning about what a good idea is, because those are two really separate things as well.
I just drew a little triangle. I thought it was like a Jeremy May triangle in marketing that I'm going to trademark
exactly
for you.
Yeah.
But there are three core parts to that, and there are some people who have all three. Most have a strong bias to two.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so understanding where your weakness is, and I guess building teams so that as a collective you have the three. Yeah,
for sure. Exactly. So in a team, you can acknowledge that you're not going to have all of those things, but really the sum of all the parts is where you need to be.
And the ways of working, so that
exactly.
Like, I'm a discerner, I'm not an ideas person.
Yeah, exactly.
That means I have to work with ideas people who are comfortable with me doing what I'm good at.
Exactly. And sometimes taking the embryonic idea and turning it into the much better executed example. Does that make sense?
Well, the viable version of it that has the big budget energy, because you've really thought about how you're going to commercially integrate this into the business.
We've got a great example of this, I would say. Not that this speaks to whether members of our team are or are not one or all of these things, but working in teams to achieve the outcome you just talked about. We've got a great example. So we carve out time to have brainstorming sessions. Nearly always go to the pub to do it. There's no wrong or right answer. It's just we sit there and just throw things up in the air. Sometimes there'll be very specific objectives of the ideas we're trying to come up with, and others not.
How often do you do that?
It's at least every couple of months. I can't remember the exact cadence for like this, but it's like a standing order meeting that happens.
Incredible.
And we've actually got one next week, so I'm looking forward to. A great example of this is one of the ideas that came out of that. We were actually trying to come up with a really like smart but simple rate of sale boosting idea, right? So we've seen some great examples of this lately. We loved the one that Days Brewing did, which was free Taylor Swift tickets. Show up. I love the one. I think Jubel did something very clever, which was giving away $5,000 of cash. Where's Wally? You had to follow him on Instagram. Brilliant. What can our version of that be, which is basically actually going to try and drive rate of sale? We came up with an idea, executed it, didn't really pick up. But anyway, during that meeting, we also, Emily, our head of marketing, came up with the idea that Taylor Swift was coming to town. How could we get either a lookalike of Taylor Swift to pick up a can and have that go viral, or could we actually get a can into Taylor Swift's hands, right? Anyway, lots of ideas about it. Not really going to work. Is this going to feel feasible? And then Amy, who is our brand manager, marketing manager, figured out that the chances of making that work with Taylor Swift are so low. But the big story of the time was her relationship with Travis Kelce. So suddenly it became like, well, what we could do is much more subtle. Because obviously also, Taylor Swift's never going to go to a Sainsbury's and buy a can of our wine. It's too unbelievable to think it would actually happen. So it was then reimagined into, well, we probably could do it with a Travis Kelce lookalike. And also, our wine director is a bit of a Travis Kelce lookalike. So suddenly it's like, well, we can actually do this for the cost of like buying the wine in the shop. Don't have to hire anyone, doesn't have to be mega. So we dressed another one of our team up as a security guard. Amy went in and took the video as if she was just a punter, and it went nuts. Like her own Instagram story got over 1 million views on her personal. Then we did all the seeding to try and get this picked up. So then Capital Radio picked it up and said, you'll never believe it, but Travis Kelce's just been seen in Wembley Sainsbury's picking up a can of wine, would you believe it? We then put that out to the press. Vogue picked up on it. It was like ad campaign of the week. I had about 50 messages from people saying, oh my God, have you just seen this? Travis Kelce's picked up your wine. And I was like, oh my God, we've conned the entire country. But what was brilliant is it then started a narrative of some people being like, oh my God, I can't believe it's Travis. And others being like, are you joking? This guy's 6 foot, not 6'5". But it was brilliant because it wasn't like, didn't feel like it was hoodwinking the public. It was a bit of fun, and we announced it straight away that it was like, it's
but
not
just
real.
Let it.
Yeah, but let it just
have a life of
permeate.
its own.
It was brilliant. Yeah. And that is, I know, come back to it, that is an example of like an idea that started here, that evolved over to here. And you never know if these things are going to work, but it just worked. And like we were then able to send it out to every single customer saying, look, Nice has gone viral this weekend again, because we've had it a couple of times before. So yeah, it was epic.
Is part of that success story the failures that we don't see go viral?
100%, 100%. Another, so I don't mind sharing the one that didn't. I
mean,
we've had had loads that
but I think
don't
it's
work.
really important to
We've had
to
loads that
like
don't. Exactly.
It feels like it's just hit after hit, and actually
100%.
like the failure culture must be so part
exactly.
of what makes it possible.
Yeah. So the other idea that we came up with, which if you could get it right, I think could be epic. But whether these things go or don't go is sometimes way out of your control. But I had seen there was a guy in Australia, Kiwi guy, but based in the US, who he's a gambling guy, right? So he just started a thread one day saying, I'm going to go to a casino every day and bet 10 cents on blackjack for every follower I have. Started really small, but eventually he had like millions of followers, right? And the amount of followers he had was then building up, so he would go in there, and in a way with that model he couldn't really lose, because he kept going in, increasing the bet, and he was winning, and it was all going really well. He got up to like $1 million. It was insane. But it was basically like crowdsourcing, and the more people heard about it, the more it went viral. And so we thought, is there any way we could do something that like borrows from that principle, right? So and the principle was, we called it Cash Me If You Can. So we said, let me think about the actual mechanics of this. We said, we're going to give away £1 for every person who buys a can of wine, who sends a receipt in and shows them buying a can of wine. That's it. All they got to do is send it in. And we did some calculations, and we figured that if only this amount of people did it, and it got, but we're going to just increase it every day. So like, here's the link, send your receipt in, and you're going to literally see the total going up and up and up, right? And tell all your friends. And so basically every time you bought a can, it was an entry to win what we hoped would become like
massive,
tens of thousands of pounds. And if it really worked, it would have actually driven rate of sale to the point where like, that's not quite, that's not anywhere near the margin we actually make on those sales, but like the value of the uptick is enough to sort of make that feel worthwhile.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So it didn't pop, but like, if a big brand could do that and it would work well, you would essentially almost be, every product you bought was essentially a lottery ticket to win the amount that is undefined, because it gets defined by how many people do it. So I'm going to give that as a free idea to like Coca-Cola, because if they got it right,
so
if you had a high enough margin product, you could give away £1 for every single one that was bought. And
your assumption that for every 10 people who buy it, one's going to upload the receipt.
Exactly. Yeah.
You gave that a go.
Gave it a go.
Let it run for a bit, and then you're just comfortable going, for
we
whatever reason,
this hasn't
caught
worked.
the zeitgeist.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we gave away £1,000, and that was it. And so fine, we sold an extra 1,000 over about 2 weeks, but it didn't work. And like, we hoped that it would, and we also didn't set an end date to it. So we were hoping that it would pick up, and we go, oh my God, this has got so big so quickly, I can't believe it. We're gonna have to call it off now. Like, but someone is getting, tomorrow we'll call it, and then someone's gonna get 20 grand. And that would have worked, because we would have sold 20,000 extra. We would have also shown the retailers that we are on it.
Exactly.
And that everything we do turns to gold, and we get an extra 1,000 store distribution. It pays for itself overnight.
Yeah,
and
then you get the
we would have
phone
spent
call
that
from
money on a marketing campaign of some other kind anyway. So like, it is somewhat linked to a good idea, but execution is difficult, and it doesn't always hit.
So back to the triangle.
Exactly, back to the triangle. I know.
Ideas,
exactly. Yeah.
It's all in 100%.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Final question.
Yeah.
I feel like we've been nattering
for
ages. Time has flown. What is one thing that someone listening to this can help you with? And people do help.
Question. Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, a facetious answer would be, we'd love a Tesco listing. No.
Tesco? Dial in.
Yeah, exactly. Tesco, call me. One person listening to this could help us with. One thing I'm really fascinated by is the role of AI in marketing asset creation.
Yeah.
It's a really complex thing. But I really want to better understand both how to use AI, generative AI, in a way that is going to be additive to brands and brand content creation, but also that doesn't undermine the trust of the people consuming that content. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
We're obviously just in this embryonic moment of AI that truly I don't think no one understands, but some of the stuff that I've seen content creation wise coming out of AI is mind-blowing. And like, how do you basically strike the balance of using it to create things of any kind? And obviously in Hollywood they've had a huge issue with this recently, which is what all the strikes were about. How do we work out both how to use it and when is morally correct to use it, and how overt do you have to be, or should you be being about that? Does that make sense?
It does.
I don't know if you're you have any robots that can help with that.
The question before that,
Yeah.
which is just if anyone's using it really well
Yeah.
in a way that's actually genuinely saving time, I feel like right now there's a solution that my team are not quite there at.
Yeah.
And it's driving me a bit nuts.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'm this like clown
Yeah.
muddling through, just like I haven't found the right platform, I haven't found the right use case or whatever. So yes,
Yeah.
I'd love to have some conversations.
Yeah.
I'll report back. I don't know if we can solve ethics
quite
yet, but maybe just some like...
It's a forum that needs to be
point.
had, isn't it? The other thing I would say, if not to provide too many answers to the same question, but one of the things we didn't get onto today is, and one of the challenges I think we've had from a marketing perspective is believing our own, believing our own gut instinct too much, or relying on gut instinct too much.
Fascinating. So like the discerning,
exactly
how you do that discerning point really
exactly.
well.
And so when it comes to packaging design, or all the things I talked about right at the beginning, when it comes to new ranges, it's very easy to think you know everything. And so something we've started to do a lot more is try to get as much totally objective feedback as possible, or in fact sort of subjective really. We're looking for as many true opinions of our stuff that aren't people blowing smoke up our ass. Does that make sense?
And do you mean like from within the industry, or do you mean from customers?
Everyone, but like truthful
Which
feedback.
is like actual raw
exactly.
feedback.
So like everyone's gonna, to my face, be really kind about things. Well, actually, you get both. You get people who are like consistent naysayers, especially in the early days of trying to start a business, because they're like, no, I think I'll do it this way, and you have to be able to cut some of that stuff out. But so I guess the ask here would be, anyone who sees anything to do with our brand, packaging, product, whatever, and would be brave enough or kind enough to give me really clear feedback and constructive feedback on it. I literally want to hear
that's
it.
The point.
That's the thing. It's like, I think you could have done this better. Whether you choose to do anything with that or not is fine.
It's such a kind thing to give someone really considered feedback.
Exactly, yeah.
It's really unkind to lie to them and to say it's all great.
Exactly. What do you think about our new logo? You love it, yeah.
Amazing.
That's rubbish. Yeah, exactly.
Or just like not engage the brain.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
like, beautiful.
Yeah,
it's like, no, give me that
Why?
5 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
To articulate, and then it's clearly really unkind to be negative for the sake of it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that's a really nice ask.
Okay.
But also Tesco's cool.
Tesco and AI and all the other things.
And the ethics of AI.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great. Enjoyed it.
Really fun.
Cool.
Thank you so much for listening. If you loved the episode, please leave a review on Apple or Spotify. It really helps us grow and get more brilliant guests on for you. If you want to hear more real insights from the life of a founder in startup marketing, give me a follow on LinkedIn, where I am very vulnerable and raw and post every day. I would love to connect. And that is a wrap until next time. Remember, you can always get in touch to recommend who we should interview next, and I will DM them and see what I can do.